Welcome to the Gladden Longevity Podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, where our passion is helping you become an age checker. On this show, we want to help you optimize your life energy, longevity, health, and human performance with impactful and actionable information by answering 4 questions. How good can we be? How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live well beyond 120? And how do we live young for a lifetime? I'm Steve Reiter, back in the saddle with you, Dr. Gladden.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you too, my man. And
Yeah.
For our monthly Q&A, we have a handful of things that we wanted to talk about, as well as some developments there at Gladden Longevity, especially around you are getting ready to launch a provider certification. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, when the book was published, and even prior to the book being published, when I would give talks to groups, many people would come up and ask me, could you train me in how to do that? Could you show me how to do what you're doing? And I never really had the time to do it because I was in the middle of writing the book and doing all the other stuff. But now that the book has been out and it's a book that continues to kind of grow in sales, right? We didn't push with massive marketing dollars up front, but
Yeah.
it's one of these things that sort of, as more people read it, and they pass it on, and more people read it, and that sort of thing. So it's developing kind of a nice groundswell of readership, and um, people are really complimenting the book. They're really liking the book a lot. Like, it's really well. I hear this all the time. It's really well written. It's really understandable. You really make the complex simple,
Yeah.
and yet it's very comprehensive. And so,
Very.
yeah. And so I, I basically have been giving quite a few talks. I gave 2 last week, and when I mentioned the Gladden longevity certification course, many practitioners come up and they're super excited to want to jump in on it. And I think what distinguishes this course from many others is because I've been around some of the other courses, the other courses are more about introducing people to concepts. I want this to be a course where people have a deep dive on the concepts and they really understand what's going on at a deeper level. But they also walk away with things that they can use practically in their clinics. And so looking at protocols and processes and procedures and how these different things get linked together to create this symphony of longevity, if you will, and then giving them actual insights in terms of how to interpret these tests and how to link the tests together, and what happens when you get a test from one result that appears to contradict a test result from another test, right? And so how do you put those things together?
Yeah.
What lenses are you looking through? So there's many subtleties to actually getting this right. And so I want to download that information, share that wisdom, because really the mission for us is to, change the glide path of aging for everybody on the planet. And so if we can have more
Yeah.
practitioners aligned around that thought process, and we can help them and build a community around that, I think that would be a terrific thing to do. So to that end, I haven't put on a course before, but we have the substrate for it, and we're working with people that have put on courses before to actually help us with the platform and the rollout and how to do all that. So all the mechanics of it, if you will. So I'm super excited for it. It's a big project. Like I said, it's going to run for a year. We'll probably do 3 hours worth of classwork every 2 weeks, and then we'll have, maybe once a month. In addition, we'll have an hour or so where we get together and answer questions and talk about things that are coming up and things like that. So I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be great.
Well, when you describe this course, it sounds like versus the courses that you've taken in the past, it feels like the other courses were just talking about the theoretical concepts around a hammer. Meanwhile, you're giving them the hammer and showing them how to use it.
That's a really good analogy. Yeah, I'm going to show them how to pick up the hammer, use the hammer, and build a house with it. And that's really what I want to do. Yeah. So it's not just about, oh, here's hammers and here's nails and here's boards, and wouldn't it be great if we built a house, right? So
Yeah.
that's a great analogy. Mm-hmm.
So past guests there at Gladden Longevity, Dr. Ernie Navarro,
Yeah.
is no longer with you. He's moved on to telemedicine, right?
Yeah, he has. He decided that he didn't want to be connected to a clinic, and wanted to have some more geographical freedom to practice telehealth and do some things in that direction. So, I respect that. I mean, everybody has their own life course.
Yeah.
And certainly we've been practicing telemedicine here for well over a decade at Gladden Longevity, actually ever since we started. So we do it all the time also, but I think it's really nice to have a clinic where people can come and get procedures done and be seen in person. And there's some things that you can't do over telemedicine, of course, that you can do in a clinic. So I don't see us ever moving away from a clinic because I think there's so many cool things we can do here. But we're expanding. We've always been in the telehealth space, and we're expanding rapidly into the AI space as well. We've been working on AI for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's now coming to a fruition with some really, really cool new things. We'll have to do a podcast on it in the near future, but
Well,
super fun.
let's tease that for the listeners. Let's describe the hammer and not tell them how to use it.
Yeah. So, well, we've been building a Gladden longevity library for about 4 years, and we have thousands of articles in there, basically behind the circles like life, energy, longevity, health,
Yeah.
performance, and now the environment.
Yeah.
And so we're also finding ways to put even more articles in. We've also created a very, very detailed scorecard for clients that we'll be using shortly to let them know where they stand relative to many of the test results that they get, and then how that coalesces into an age for an organ system, and then a global age, if you will. So we're super excited about that. And then the AI that we're using is sophisticated enough. We're doubling it up with the avatar of me that's been developed, which basically you can talk to, you can ask questions and things like that. And we're going to be coaching that AI to actually be able to start to interpret the tests and coach people, because we want to be able to go to virtual coaching. We can't practice medicine virtually, but we can health coach virtually. And so we think this will be another great way for us to expand our reach and also to help our current clients. So we're super excited about that. So all that is actually happening right now. It's not theoretical. It's actually we're going through the iterations of trial and teaching and seeing where we are. So super
Well,
fun. Yeah.
I've played around a little with the AI tool there on the website,
Mhm.
and it's intriguing.
Yeah.
It's intriguing where this thing could go.
Yeah, exactly. So
Dr. Gladden, what other kinds of changes are going on there at Gladden Longevity?
well, we've really built out the research arm here. We hired a guy, Scott Weage, who worked at Johns Hopkins for 20 years doing clinical trials, and is very well connected in the research space, very well thought of, and then spent 7 years working for community hospitals running different trials for them. And so he came on in January as our director of research. And then we also hired Jessica Jones, who used to work at the heart hospital that I co-founded in research there, and then took a hiatus to have her family. And with her kids back in school, she's back working with us now 3 days a week. And that's been great because we're really getting lots of our research organized in-house and things like that. And now we've been running trials, but we're actually refining how those trials are going forward, and we're opening up new trials for people. So we're running a little trial right now, just with the office staff, looking at a supplement called Vinia, which is a new kind of resveratrol called Pycid, which we did a podcast
featured on
Exactly.
the podcast.
That's right. So we're interested to see, if you take Vinia, what will it do? Will it improve vascular function? We know that it decreases vasoconstriction and improves nitric oxide production. Can we actually demonstrate that? Can we show that it actually improves Klotho gene upregulation with improved Klotho levels, which are very important for longevity? And so we're looking into this to see, well, what is this actually doing? And now we're being approached by other people that want us to test other products for them and things like that. So that's interesting in and of itself. And then the brain frequency is a piece that we're pushing forward on a research protocol also to help people with concussions or TBIs or strokes or anxiety or depression, or people that just want to enhance their cognitive ability. and it's all EEG based. And then you do these treatments, 1 to 2 a day. And after every 10 treatments, you do a follow-up EEG, and the machine is recalibrated to kind of gently move your brain from where it starts into sort of optimal function, if you will. And then we're combining it with certain peptides and certain supplements that actually augment the process. And yeah, so these things are really, really beneficial to people. This is a study that people would pay to participate in. But then they're also allowing us to collect their data and learn and improve it for everybody. So yeah, so those are some of the big changes. Yeah.
Well, we mentioned that Vinia, you were starting to do some work with, and Dr. Brian Kornblatt was a past guest, episode number 220 for listeners that are interested in that. Vinia is pretty fascinating supplements
Hmm.
that we've talked about a number of times, and it's one of those supplements that you use in your regular supplement
Yeah.
stack. So
Yeah, I
talk a
do.
little bit about that for the listeners and why, what it is specifically that you're looking to do with these studies.
Right. So just to refresh people's memories, Avinia is basically um, harvested from grapes. Okay. So we know that grapes are a source of resveratrol. These grapes are actually grown in a bioreactor,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is very cool. So it's like an artificial growth environment, if you will. And
And they're stressed within that
that's
within
right. And
that
because they're in this artificial
bioreactor.
environment, they're actually being stressed, um, kind of prescriptively stressed in a way to where they optimally produce these phytonutrients, these phytochemicals that actually help them adapt to stress. And those turns out that those phytochemicals, most polyphenols, are super healthy for us. So these grapes are grown under conditions that optimize the polyphenol content. And then when you take a capsule of Vinia, you're getting not only this special form of resveratrol called Piceid, Piceid resveratrol, um, but you're also getting lots of other phytonutrients around it. And it's the equivalent of like eating hundreds of grapes, right, in one capsule. So you're getting lots of resveratrol. And the beautiful thing about the Piceid resveratrol is that it's absorbed about 70 to 80% of it is absorbed, as opposed to a much smaller percentage, 2, 3, 4, 5%
With regular resveratrol that you get
exactly.
it off Amazon or whatever.
Exactly. So you're getting a much bigger load of it. And then what their studies have shown previously is that it can basically upregulate nitric oxide production. It can downregulate AT1, which is a molecule that causes vasoconstriction. So now you're improving sexual function, you're improving athletic performance, you're improving brain function, things like that. So, and then in addition, they've shown that that resveratrol activates many of the genes related to longevity. So it activates AMPK, it activates Clotho, and things like that. And these genes basically then create cascades of activities that repair DNA, re-lengthen telomeres, and improve kidney function and heart function and brain function and blood vessel function, things like this. So we're just very curious to see what can this molecule, what can these capsules actually do for people. So we're doing a trial to look at a lot of different markers, some of which we don't think are really that it's probably going to impact, but it's like, well, let's cast a wide net and actually see what it actually does.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we're in the midst of that trial right now. We did a little pilot trial 2 weeks ago, and now we started one last Friday that's going to run for 30 days. And we're doing lots of different testing. And when we get the results, we'll share it here on the podcast as to what we've learned. The early data suggests, however, that there's a really nice increase in energy levels for people as they take this. So that's really been kind of satisfying. And now we're waiting to see some of the other stuff.
Energy can be subjective, though. How objectively are you really tracking that?
Yeah, energy can
to
be
make sure?
subjective for sure. I think, these are self-reported sort of studies, if you will,
Yeah.
in that element. And then we're also looking at the energetic levels through another metric called brain tap, where we can hook somebody up to a machine, and the machine will tell us kind of where their biological energy is at, if you will, their neurohormonal balance and energy levels are at. So
Mm.
we do get some objective feedback on it as well as subjective. So,
Well, we got an email. We got a link to a video off of YouTube from our producer Leo, and the title is comes from a German news organization. The title is AI Reveals Huge Amounts of Fraud in Medical Research. And when I was watching that video, I was blown away that 10,000 reports, papers were retracted last year alone, which is an unheard of number. And it's AI.
Yeah, it's interesting that the AI is now policing this industry. You know, we've known several things. One, we know that the academics are under tremendous pressure to publish. So there's tremendous pressure on them to maintain their or gain their tenure, or maintain their salaries, or maintain their labs, or maintain their whole departments, if you will, based on their ability to publish reliable research and data. And it becomes very much of a prestige for them. It's related to their academic advancement and all these kinds of things. So there's tremendous pressure on them to do this. As you can imagine, there's a little bit of cheating that goes on in this world that before now wasn't really brought to light. And as it turns out, they're under pressure. Then you've got medical journals that are under pressure to publish articles. And so it turns out that the medical journals are not doing a very good job of actually peer reviewing these articles. And so you can actually pay to play. You can pay somebody to publish your article, and they don't even look at the data. This is what was brought out in this YouTube video. And so you can start to see where something that you thought was kind of a pristine thing, like medical research information, is kind of pristine, right? It's above corruption. You start to see that, even senior people at Harvard and Stanford and places like this have been fudging their data and utilizing old data intermixed with new data to kind of create an outcome that they're looking for. And so it's really disheartening and discouraging to see this, because we know things have gone on like this in other areas, right? Whether it's related to pandemics or whatever else, where the literature gets skewed into a direction that's giving you one outcome when actually that may or may not even be the outcome. So it's discouraging.
When you say that, I'm reminded of the quote that Mark Twain made famous. There are three types of lies in this world: lies, damned lies, and statistics.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. Statistics, exactly. So statistically you can make anything say anything, right? As you pretty much know, particularly if you study statistics. So I think it's discouraging because we know that many of the studies that do get published, the results can never be reproduced, right? So it's a very high percentage that can never be reproduced. So where does it leave us, right? Because here we are, we're hungry for information, we're hungry for reliable data, we're hungry to make the best decisions we can for people. And now it's like the whole infrastructure of medical literature is being challenged. And in the interview, they were talking about, tens and tens of thousands of more articles that will be retracted as this AI goes to work. So people's careers are going to be, affected. Funding is going to be affected. It's going to have big ramifications. But the beauty of it is that ultimately it allows us potentially to get back to a cleaner baseline where when data is published, we can start to have more confidence in it. And that's really critical. So
I'm reminded of that study. I don't remember where it was, but power poses increase testosterone.
Okay.
And it was never replicated. It
Oh,
was
good.
big on the news that, hey, how you hold yourself will increase your testosterone.
Okay.
Do the Superman pose.
I saw that. Yeah.
Get your arm up over the couch and like you're in command.
Okay.
It was never replicated.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, this stuff goes on all the time. And that's
and I think part of the problem is the media jumps on this stuff.
That's right.
And they will,
that's right.
A glass of wine a day will, increase
Yeah.
decrease health,
Yeah.
heart disease.
Yeah.
And
Well, and that's the other piece of it is the media is hungry for, news stories that capture readers, right? So when they come across something that's interesting, then they kind of blow it up and aggrandize it in ways that, kind of takes it beyond the scope of what it is. And a lot of
yeah,
times the data is preliminary and it's not even conclusive. And yet all of a sudden it's a new thing, right? And so the reader or the listener or the watcher or the viewer has to be incredibly savvy about. And I think the world is getting much more skeptical about stuff that they hear. It's like, well, let's really get some data. Let's really see. So that's why we love the research because it enables us to do our own research and learn what we can learn. We've been doing this our whole time that we've been in practice. We've been doing little things inside to kind of understand how things work, but now we're able to do it in a bigger way. And the idea is to be able to loop in other practices to do this as well, which will also be porous.
well, we got a question from a listener. Question is, please tell me your opinion of 23andMe DNA testing versus Intelix DNA versus New Amsterdam Genomics. Which do you use for your patients?
Yeah. So 23andMe testing, DNA testing, and Ancestry.com and things like that, they're reasonable tests. They're basically limited in terms of what they can report. And there are softwares, aftermarket softwares, that you can run those genetics through to kind of get a little bit more information. But when it comes to sequencing DNA, you want to have a lot of oversampling. In other words, you want to test that gene 20, 30, 200 times
Really?
to make sure that you're getting it right. And so the highest quality gene testing is associated with high rates of oversampling. So like Intelix DNA is very meticulous about oversampling the DNA to make sure they get it right. New Amsterdam is quite meticulous about this. And so what we like to do is some people will bring us their 23andMe and their Ancestry.com stuff, and we'll run it through some software. And we've done this in the past and given them the information that we can. But we really prefer to use high quality genome sequencing coupled with high quality reporting. So everybody knows that it costs, billions of dollars to sequence the first human genome, and now it's relatively cheap to do it. So the cost in a genetics test is no longer in the sequencing; it's actually in all of the information that goes into the reporting, right? Understanding what this gene is, how it works, how it interrelates with other genes, what it's actually doing to either protect you or potentially harm you, and then what you need to do to actually upregulate or downregulate its expression. That's where the cost of gene testing is. And so when you get a genetic test like 23andMe, it gives you the gene, it tells you, your eyes are going to more apt to be blue, you're more apt to have male pattern baldness, you're more apt to have prostate cancer, you're more apt to have something like that. But it doesn't really tell you.
It's like you're describing me.
But
You're looking at me.
It doesn't really tell you. It doesn't tell you what to do about it. It doesn't tell you things that you could do to mitigate that or information that's really actionable. And so we've really shied away from the more commercial tests like that into tests that are much better research, that have very large bibliographies of articles behind them to elucidate what the gene does, how it works in concert with other genes, and what you can do to actually optimize its expression. So,
well, I know we've had Joe Cohen on with Self Decode, and I'm wondering if I know he has said that his DNA test is better than 23andMe.
Yeah, it's due to oversampling, right? It's really the oversampling rate, and I think Joe really does try to do a really good job, right? And they do make recommendations. I can tell you that I've been through all of their stuff, and it's not as academically rigorous as some of the other companies that are out there. It is more financially accessible, but when you're dealing with your health, you want to get really high quality information. And so in this case, you kind of get what you pay for. Yeah.
Well, this month is it's a number of awareness months. It's Alcohol Awareness Month, Stress Awareness Month, IBS Awareness Month, and Parkinson's Awareness Month.
Okay.
Alcohol is the one that you wanted to most touch
Well,
on.
I think it's the most ubiquitous, right? Parkinson's, IBS. IBS is common. Parkinson's is not rare, but many people don't have it, right? So, but alcohol really affects so many people's lives. It's interesting that the U.S. Basically just joined France and England in reestablishing their recommendations on alcohol consumption. So, it used to be that I think it was in 1990 they came out with a recommendation that moderate drinking was 2 drinks per day for a man and 1 drink a day for a woman. That was considered moderate alcohol consumption. That was on a daily basis. Um, and now they've realized that there's so much alcohol-related pathology, disease, and decline, and other issues that they've now turned it back to moderate alcohol consumption is 1 drink a day. And I think it's 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, and 1.5 ounces of 40% spirits, right? I think that's the definition of a drink. Studies have been done looking at longevity, showing that people that do consume some alcohol actually live longer than people that don't. And so the question is, okay, well, why is that? Well, it has to do with the fact that when you drink some alcohol, you induce an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. And alcohol dehydrogenase processes the alcohol, but it also processes other things in your body that tend to accumulate with age. And so you decrease those elements. And the way that I get around that is I don't drink alcohol per se in terms of ordering a glass of wine or a beer or a drink. I mean, maybe once a year at a wedding or something, I'll have a couple of sips of something, right? But it's not like, and I'm not anti-alcohol. It's just that I found
Yeah.
that it really kind of wrecks my sleep. My HRV goes down. My slow wave sleep is jacked up, and I don't feel as good the next morning. And my workouts are off. And I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
like that. I like to feel good. I want to have a great workout. So I just quit because of that. That being said, I do drink kombucha because it has some probiotics. It is a fermented tea. It has a trace of alcohol in it,
Yeah. A
probably
little bit.
0.5%. And in years gone by, when I was drinking kombucha, if you're not drinking at all and you drink a beer, right, or you have a glass of wine, you sort of feel it, right, because that enzyme is not upregulated to handle the alcohol, so you really kind of feel it. When I was drinking kombucha, and I would have a beer or something like that, I wouldn't feel it at all. And I'm like, oh, well, that's really interesting. That means that the alcohol dehydrogenase is truly upregulated by just that trace amount of alcohol.
Really? Huh.
So I find that that's how I've kind of made peace with the thing, right? It's like I'll drink some kombucha and they make a harder kombucha. I think that's maybe closer to 1% or something like that. I rarely ever get that. I don't know. I'm not really looking for a buzz or anything from it. But I think if you get a little bit of alcohol in some form, that's a good thing. And if you want to drink regular wine or something like that, do it, once or twice a week. But this daily consumption of alcohol is, what we see is it really derails people's progress. The people that make the most progress with us are people that, cut back significantly on their alcohol. They don't have to quit. We're not asking anybody to quit. But sometimes people will say, you know what, I figured out, I just don't want to do it anymore. It's like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but we have clients that have been successful that have continued to have some alcohol in their world. But if they're drinking on a regular basis, 2-3 drinks every day, or binging on the weekends or whatever, they just never make the progress that they used to. And the other interesting thing is that we do epigenetic testing with the True Age, which most people now have probably heard of True Age epigenetic testing. It's a way to look at your epigenetic age, right? One of your biological ages. And now there are multiple ages that they're reporting on. And one of the things that they're reporting on now is the epigenetics changes that occur with alcohol consumption. So if somebody is to say, I don't drink alcohol, but you do the epigenetic test, you can actually see that their genes have changed their expression in response to the alcohol. So now you can actually see that they're actually drinking, even if they said they weren't drinking, which isn't really like a lie detector test. But from our perspective, it's interesting because we can sort of see what's actually happening behind the curtain.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned kombucha. Are you buying that at the store? Are there any particular
I've
brands
made
or
it.
even flavors that you
Yeah, I've
like?
made it at home. I bought it at the store. I typically just, there are lots of kombuchas out there. I'm sure there are ones that are better. I tend to go to the store and buy, a ginger ale or something like that, one of the GTs or, one of the local kombuchas. Everybody worries about, well, I look at the label, it has so much sugar in it. And it's like, well, that's the sugar content before the fermentation process. So, yeah.
Really?
So they have to report the sugar content before the fermentation process. So, a lot of that sugar or some of that sugar at least gets converted into alcohol or converted. And so, I don't drink large quantities of it, but and one thing I'll do is I will dilute it. I'll pour some kombucha in a glass. I'll dilute it with water or sparkling water or Pellegrino or something like that. Throw in some lemon or whatever, and it's just got flavor and
Yeah.
texture and whatever else, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not getting a lot of sugar that way, and I'm not getting a lot of alcohol, but I'm getting enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Well, another awareness month that it is Stress Awareness Month,
Yep.
as well as IBS Awareness Month. And one of those articles that was shared says study links stress to onset of IBS.
Yeah.
So talk about a little bit about that, about stress and its link to IBS, and then
Yeah.
stress in general.
Yeah. Well, I think stress in general is a function of not feeling safe. We talk about this in the life energy circle. I think if you're feeling stressed, if you think about it or feel into it, at some level, it's because you don't feel safe. And so the question becomes, how do you give yourself safety? And I think that many rely on something external to themselves to feel safe. Well, if I just had this much money, if I just get past this hurdle, if I could land that job, if I could meet this woman, if I could have this relationship, if I could have a better relationship with my kids or whatever it is, then I would feel safe. And in actual fact, what I've come to understand is that there's nothing external to us that can ever make us feel safe because we can't control any of those things, right? And so being able to find safety apart from anything external becomes one of the keys. And that's for me, that's a psycho-spiritual journey around feeling safe, feeling spiritually connected, feeling aligned with the universe, etc. When you have that, all of a sudden, you can have things that typically would be stressful come at you, and you're able to deflect them, kind of like, Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, sort of dodging bullets, right? So it's kind of like it comes by, but you look at it going by you. It's not like it hits you head on.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that perspective is massively important. I think on top of that, when you layer in things like meditation or going into flow states or listening to music that puts your mind into a meditative state, or using some of the devices that we've talked about here, like Brain Tap or things like this that can actually put you into a meditative state, it can have a massive impact on your experience of stress. And I like coupling those kinds of activities with this resetting the framework for safety, right? Reset the framework for safety. Now you layer on these other pieces and throw in some exercise, which is a great way to kind of dissipate sympathetic nervous system energy.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you can get to a point where you're actually able to deal with life and not be stressed. And we know the health implications of that are incredible. And so in the articles that we were looking at, stress was basically being implicated as a precipitant of inflammatory bowel syndrome, right? So IBS. And so really important to manage stress. Now, IBS itself is complex.
Also,
Well, everything related to the bowel is complex. What we find is that if you're really going to understand how to optimize somebody's gut, let's say, you really have to start from the mouth and go all the way through the rectum to really organize it, and you really have to understand all the different elements in play. Like, what's the microbiome in the mouth? What's the stomach pH? What's the pancreatic enzyme levels doing? What's the gallbladder doing in terms of emulsifying fats? What's the diet, and what's being left in the stool? Are they optimizing protein absorption and fat absorption, things like that? Then you've got to know, is there bacterial overgrowth? Is there yeast overgrowth? Do they have genetics that predispose them to inflammatory bowel disease? Some of the genes related to Crohn's predisposition and gluten sensitivity. And then what are their food sensitivities? And then do they have leaky gut? And do they have, and until you actually unravel that full knot, and do they have factors that show that the gut is actually inflamed, like calprotectin and other inflammatory markers that we measure in stool tests? Once you get the full picture of what's going on, then you actually have a hope of actually putting it back together. But if you simply say, well, I'm going to cut out gluten and dairy and hope for the best, and you've got lots of other things going on, it's not a bad thing to do. It's just not maybe enough or an completely adequate thing to do. So yeah, that's how we think about the gut. Every time we approach the gut, it has to be through a comprehensive lens, because it's complex, it's interrelated, and we found that that's the only way to ever get results. And then the other thing about alcohol is if people continue to drink, it rips up their gut, right? They have yeast growth, they have bacterial overgrowth, and we never get the guts cleaned up for people that are on alcohol the way we can for people when they're not drinking alcohol. So that's just just an empiric observation, right? So
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Gladden, thank you for this month's Q&A. For listeners, if you are interested in sending us a question that you want answered next month, be sure to send us an email at podcast@gladdenlongevity.com. That's podcast@gladdenlongevity.com. There will also be a link in the show notes with not only to send us an email with your question, but also some of the articles that we mentioned and some of the resources. Dr. Gladden, one last time, if we have practitioners listening right now, or if someone wants to talk to their doctor about this Gladden longevity certification, how do people find out more about that?
Yeah, right now, you could reach out to gladdenlongevity.com. Just reach out there, reach out to our people and let them know you're interested. And we're keeping a list of people as they let us know that, and we'll be letting them know. And then there'll be quite a bit of marketing elements that go out that we're working through some fairly large groups of people that have quite a few physicians and practitioners in their networks and things like that really want to help us get this word out. So there'll be lots of information coming that way. But if you're interested, it's probably going to start in June is what we're shooting for. Just let us know, and then we'll keep you in the loop. So, okay.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Gladden Longevity Podcast. If you would like more information on what we've discussed or other topics, please reference the show notes or go to GladdenLongevityPodcast.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by searching Gladden Longevity. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to get future episodes delivered to you, and share our podcast or this episode with someone in your life that you may find benefit. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another exciting episode. The Gladden Longevity Podcast is provided for informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The use of any information and materials linked to this podcast is at the listener's own risk.